Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program, Mark Hackl, who's Managing Director of Lanehub at Transplace. And today we're going to talk about freight lane matching and collaboration. Now, everyone in the transportation industry knows that there's a lot of waste in the system. Waste in the form of underutilized capacity and empty miles, for example, that results in added costs and inefficiencies for both shippers and carriers. One way to address this problem is through collaborative shipping. That is, have multiple shippers and carriers work together, to create more efficient and cost-effective operations. Historically, collaborative shipping has been easier said than done, but thanks to advancements in technology and other factors, it's certainly gaining momentum today. So how is technology helping to enable collaborative shipping? What are some of the challenges, and what are the benefits to both shippers and carriers alike? Well, those are just some of the questions we're going to address in today's episode, and it's great to have Mark on the program to share his insights and advice on this topic. So, Mark, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Adrian. It's great to be here.
Now, Mark, you and I go back, many years, and I've known a little bit about your career path, but just for our audience, I'm always curious whenever we bring on a new guest, for them to, kind of share how they got into this crazy industry that we're in today, especially during this crazy time we're in right now with, the coronavirus outbreak and everything that's happening out there. So before we dive into this topic of freight lane matching and collaboration, why don't you tell us briefly a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics, and what's your current role and responsibilities there at Transplace?
Sure, absolutely. So started my career in actually technology as a software developer, but quickly transitioned into transportation and logistics. Spent about 20 years of my career working for large manufacturers, a large paper company, which is where I saw some of the first collaboration between cross-company collaboration occurring. Also spent a good part of my career with a large dairy manufacturer, and got an opportunity to collaborate with suppliers and customers and really see how our networks aligned with one another and where we could gain efficiencies from sharing private and dedicated fleets. Spent a good part of my career also working with a carrier as a salesperson for a carrier, as well as for a large third-party logistics company. And in all of these situations, really kind of learned a lot about what works for collaboration across companies and what doesn't. Then took a little career change, launched a company called Lanehub about 5 years ago, and really enjoyed that, built that company up over that 5-year period. And we brought on close to 150 of the largest shippers in North America, representing about $23 billion in freight spend, which is very exciting. And then we were most recently here acquired by Transplace. So now working with them and very excited about taking Lanehub and what we do for our customers to the next level.
Yeah, it's great. I love it when, folks have experience in multiple nodes in the supply chain, right? So on the manufacturing side, right, the shipper side, the 3PL side, and as well as the technology side right now. So you really come at it from, multiple, perspectives that can, have walked in the shoes of all those different, roles. And I remember when you launched Lanehub, and I know I shared this on Talking Logistics because I remember it coming up and seeing your profile on LinkedIn saying, Mark has started a new role, founder of Lanehub. And when I kind of looked into it, I saw that it was around collaborative shipping, which has always been a topic of interest for me. And I know I shared the screenshot on Talking Logistics of me reaching out to you over 5 years ago, say, hey, I'm, congrats on the new role. I want to know more. And now here we are 5 years later, after this acquisition, as you mentioned, by Transplace. And certainly, like I said, in my opening comments, this has been the topic of conversation and interest for many in the industry for a long time. And but despite the kind of the recognized benefits for both shippers and carriers, historically, collaborative shipping has been easier said than done. So why don't we start there? I mean, what have been some of the historical challenges involved?
Yeah. So if you think back 20 years ago, before there was really technology out there, to help with this. A lot of folks just had very manual processes to try and align their networks, maybe meeting at a conference or, sharing data through spreadsheets, those kinds of things. And just a lot of manual intervention to try and find where those synergies could occur. The other thing is the density. There really wasn't enough, even if you found somebody to collaborate with, you needed to really have a network of companies with enough density to create real meaningful value. Otherwise, you're running too many empty miles, you're running trucks out of route. And so all of those are things were challenges initially. The other thing that I think was a challenge initially was companies often looked at it as like a one-time effort as opposed to an ongoing continuous improvement type of thing. So from a resource standpoint, they would apply resources to it, but then they become resource constrained, and eventually the initiative would just kind of go away. So those are some of the challenges initially. The other thing I would say is creating mutual benefit for all of the companies involved. So how, if you're allocating cost or savings, how do you allocate that savings in a fair way? And then the operational aspect of it. So that's really the timing of sharing capacity. What happens if a truck breaks down? The day of week that the companies are shipping. Those are some of the kind of concerns and initially that companies really had with collaborating.
Yeah, and I saw the same things too. I mean, I always saw a lot of excitement, right? And then, people would get into a conference room and like you said, they would bring out their spreadsheets or their maps and so forth and say, okay, yeah, it looks like we have some, opportunities in these lanes and these areas. But then, the devil was always in the details. And then when it came down to, the day-to-day operations of it and managing the exceptions when they occurred or understanding what those exceptions could be and what the, how each party was going to, respond to that and so forth. And that's when people got certainly there were a lot of good case studies out there, but it was those companies that really thought through all these different specifics ahead of time and worked through them versus those that kind of came out of the conference room. They went into the conference room excited for the opportunities. They came out of the conference room saying, this is probably too hard to do, particularly at that point in time with a lot of the manual processes in place. And like you said, a lot of it thinking of more in terms of a project versus a continuous business process.
Right.
I think that's been one of the bigger, changes to date. So, obviously, overcoming some of these challenges you talked about was one of the main reasons you ended up launching, Lanehub. I remember our conversation, from years ago. So how is technology, enabling collaborative shipping, today? I mean, what are some of the key capabilities required?
Yes. So, it's interesting if you go back 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, companies still weren't quite comfortable, with allowing social network type of activity at work. So Facebook or LinkedIn and those types of things. I think those were some of the changes that have occurred over the last, I'll say, 10 years here that's really enabled this type of collaboration, because the technology might have been there, but were companies allowing their employees to kind of engage and use technology the way we're using it today. So that's certainly one big change. The other thing is, I would say, making it incredibly easy for companies to participate. So simple, low cost, kind of a social network type of atmosphere as opposed to kind of a large project initiative. So those, that's part of it. The other thing is being able to quickly find the synergies. So if you have a lot of data and a very dense network of freight lanes, how do you quickly filter through all of that and find where the real opportunities are? And technology certainly enables, that capability as well. Scaling beyond the TMS is another piece that I'll talk about. So having access to a larger network of shippers who want to collaborate, where they can still remain on their existing TMS system, which maybe they've invested heavily into already, but still collaborate with other shippers, through this kind of social network and type of technology. So not forcing them to move to a specific TMS system, I think is a key piece. We focused our initiatives on the static kind of aspects of collaboration. There's a lot of companies out there right now that are looking at the digital freight matching and trying to match trucks with loads, kind from a very tactical or transactional perspective, our model is much more longer term relationships and overlaying networks and finding synergies and efficiencies that can create long-term benefit. So kind of just, and I'd say the key there is allowing companies to even share drop trailers or share fleets that have drop trailer capability versus all of the live loading and spot loads that companies sometimes get involved in. From a pricing standpoint and from an execution standpoint, the technology certainly can assist there as well. And when I say pricing, I mean creating that mutual benefit for both companies that are involved, and then helping companies easily kind of streamline the execution process associated with collaboration. So that's some of the areas that we've focused on with the technology.
You know, it's interesting you brought up, you know, digital freight and digital freight matching, because that's been a topic of conversation for, you know, certainly over the past year or two. And like you said, I mean, I think, you know, what's interesting is that there is a spectrum of types of collaboration that can take place, right? So there's more of this more real-time transactional nature, but then what you're talking about really is more around, you know, particularly for companies that have some reliability, some volume, some consistency in their network, and being able to match those in a reliable manner, where maybe you might, you know, one thinking is that those might, in some cases, might lend themselves to a dedicated fleet, if you will. But here's an opportunity. There's a different model, because you do have that repeatability and that consistency and that reliability, is the opportunity to, you know, partner up with another shipper or two shippers, let's say, or multiple shippers, to create, because all of you have that, those characteristics within these specific lanes. There's a high level of confidence that you're able to pull this off, right?
Right. Yeah. And, you know, we talked a little bit about sharing of fleets, but I think that's one aspect to it. The other aspect is companies just being able to share an incumbent carrier that one is working with that could be a good fit for the other carrier, and just create those, convert those one-way moves into more collaborative round trips for those carriers. Right.
Well, that brings me to the next, you know, point here, because I mean, you know, I'm always aware in the shipper, you know, perspective, but obviously when we talk about this type of, you know, programming opportunities, you know, the carriers are obviously a big part of this as well. So can we share with us some of the benefits that both shippers and carriers, you know, have achieved, and then how do you measure the benefits?
Sure. So I would say this, first off, just having the transparency to the opportunities. You know, too often these private or dedicated fleets, you know, when companies are going through their normal bidding processes, that capacity is not really available or visible. So one of the things that Lanehub does is creates a platform where companies can easily share that type of capacity. From a Lanehub perspective, and now Transplace, we work with those companies during their bid cycle to give them visibility to that private and dedicated fleet capacity that's out there. And again, this is, you know, this capacity is very solid, high service capacity, and typically runs at below market pricing, because many times those fleets are running empty or deadheading. So it's a great opportunity for companies to share fleets for sure. From a standpoint of the fleets themselves, whether it's a private fleet, a dedicated fleet, or a common carrier, you know, their ability to kind of grow their service areas. So today, a dedicated fleet may not be able to service a particular region of the country. Now they can maybe service that, knowing that they've got a partner company that's providing freight for that backhaul move. So those are some of the benefits. I would say also, I touched on a little bit, much less spot freight and less disruption to their operations, because the freight is much more drop trailer capable, much more friendly freight for the fleet. And then from a utilization standpoint, and the driver impact, you know, certainly predictable routes, home time for the drivers, and then the driver retention equation in this as well, all factor into kind of the benefits associated with sharing capacity.
Right. I think one of the other things, you know, certainly, you know, when you look at things like, I assume your customers, the companies that have been leveraging this, have seen, you know, reductions in empty miles or in the rates themselves. I think one of the other things that companies are thinking more and more of these days is from a sustainability angle as well, right?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I didn't talk about sustainability, but for sure, that's one of the benefits. And we've seen companies reporting on that as well.
Great, great. So now, you mentioned earlier, TMS, right? And, now that, these collaborative shipping capabilities are now part of a broader TMS, in the case of, now joining forces there with Transplace and a broader technology platform. I mean, what are the benefits and, what new benefits or opportunities does it offer to customers?
Yeah, and I would tell you that these are exciting times for us. Our goal was to be able to take Lanehub to the next level, and certainly Transplace has the ability to do that. Our scale right now, the combined networks is well over 30 billion in freight spend, so we definitely have the density to drive value for our customers, which is where it starts really, finding those cross-company synergies. But the other thing I would say is we can go beyond visibility data and really get into actionable shipment level data. And that's really where the success happens, because there's a lot of companies out there that say they have big data, but how much of it is really data you can take action on? And our relationship now with Transplace has allowed us to really get to that level of detail with our customers and produce results from an execution standpoint, so they can really realize the value of collaboration. A couple other things that I'll mention. Growing cross-client efficiencies, that's a focus for us. So leveraging those carrier fleets across our networks. One example, we have a large beverage manufacturer currently who's tendering hundreds of loads per week to other shippers that are part of the Lanehub network and leveraging their dedicated fleets. So it's a win-win for both parties. The company with the dedicated fleet is finding those backhaul moves, and certainly the beverage company is gaining capacity at high service and below market pricing. From an operation standpoint, I would say we now have some operational excellence around our ability to facilitate the collaboration across these companies. So now we're focused on market intelligence and benchmarking and the ability to bring new innovation and continuous improvement. Those are things that all we've been able to achieve now with Transplace.
I mean, it sounds like, going back to just a couple of things you've already mentioned before. I mean, it sounds like density is important here, right? So that, so it's density in terms of the number of shippers, the spend, the lane, everything else. So that uncovers more opportunities to do some of this, lane matching and collaborative, shipping. And there's also density of data, right? Or the value of data and the insights and the, more granularity you have there, that opens up other, opportunities for continuous improvement and benefits. One of the things, going back to kind of a success factor here, I know one of the things that I was always, my position has always been that it was always generally more difficult for two shippers to get into a conference room and try to hammer out the details themselves and try to manage it themselves. Whenever I saw success stories out there around collaborative shipping, it was generally managed by some kind of a third party, whether it was a 3PL or a third party company like, Lanehub or someone like that, that really served as that kind of intermediary to help facilitate, all of that. I mean, do you still see that, or do you see that? Do you agree with me that usually having some kind of a third party in general helps to, build trust in creating these relationships and in making sure everything, because exceptions are always going to occur. That's the nature of the
That's right. That's exactly right.
Transportation, right? And having a third party to help manage that and keep all parties, aligned, I view as still being critically important. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. And one thing that I'll say is that what's unique about us and differentiates us is it's not a requirement. Certainly, we can bring those resources to the table, and in many cases we do, because our customers are asking for that level of support. But it's not a requirement. So the network, like I said, is very large and dense, and you have the ability to collaborate with other companies, and it's not a requirement that you work through the 3PL aspect of it. But certainly, yeah, we bring a lot of companies value by facilitating the collaboration.
Great. So, Mark, as a way to wrap up then, I mean, what's the first step then in getting started with collaborative shipping? I mean, what are some of the key lessons learned to drive success?
Sure, sure, yeah. It starts with organizational buy-in, and that starts with reviewing case studies of other companies that have seen success, maybe trialing some lanes. How does our network fit together with some of these other companies from a trial perspective, and then building an ROI so that you can see what the value of it is and how much time and effort you want to put towards it. I would also say start with suppliers in your network, because you've already got connected networks with those companies, and certainly it's easier to collaborate with companies that you're already working with. Possibly leverage an existing fleet. We see the easiest opportunities come there because one of the two companies already has committed capacity in that dedicated or private fleet. And then, of course, companies need to have good data, so an existing TMS and having their house in order internally, good data integrity, those types of things. And then, as we just discussed, accelerating the value here by working with a third party.
Great. Well, Mark, like I said earlier, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. It's something that I've been writing about and thinking about and sharing success stories about over the past couple of decades. And so I'm very, optimistic about the future of this, particularly because of all the technology and everything we just talked about right now in terms of helping to bring down some of those barriers that have, been a challenge for companies to overcome in the past. So I think we're going to be seeing more of this, moving forward. And like I always say at the end of all our episodes, we always just manage to scratch the surface of these topics, but you certainly provided some great insights and advice for our viewers. So again, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Yes, thank you, Adrian. Appreciate it.
I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you're watching this episode on demand, either at the Transplace website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Mark, you can post it there, and I'm sure he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.